Welcome to this podcast for the WeJet GCSE English Language Creative Writing Unit. This is looking at descriptive writing and show me, don't tell me. So by the end of this podcast, hopefully you'll know what this term means and be able to use it in your own writing. So in the session we looked at an apostrophe quiz, just as a little recap of the earlier session. This is on BBC English if you want to do this YouTube quiz and answers. So don't tell me the moon is shining, show me the glint of light on broken glass. And that's a quote by Anton Chekhov. So in the class I basically asked you what emotion this person is feeling. It's actually a character from the TV show The Office. And a lot of you came out with me that he was scared, he was threatening, he was aggressive. However, there's nothing telling us in words that he is aggressive or he's angry. We're just getting from his emotion. So there's nothing telling us, but he is showing us that he is angry. So if we look at this paragraph, what is the description telling us? As the footsteps tapped closer and closer, Jack felt his stomach muscles tighten. Sweat chilled his palms. He used both hands to steady the gun. So again I asked in class, what is this passage telling us? What are we getting? What are Jack's emotions? And a lot of you said that he feels nervous. And there's no easy or boring sentence where it says Jack is scared or Jack is nervous. We are inferring from the fact that his stomach muscles are tightening that he's nervous. It's almost like a butterfly's in his stomach. The fact that he's got sweaty palms is telling us he's nervous. The fact that he has to use both hands because if you use one hand it might shake. Again, that's telling us he is nervous. So in your writing you should show, don't tell. So what this means is you should be describing action. So you shouldn't have any information or any descriptions in your creative writing that says, for example, the man was bored or the man is frustrated. You should be showing me how the man is bored, how the man is frustrated. So by showing, you create mental images in the reader's mind, and like hyperbole, like metaphors, like simile, like the sentences, like anything we've looked at in the last few weeks, you are trying to give the reader a clear picture and get them more engaged in the story and more engaged in the description. Your tutor, myself included, will probably mark about 140 to 150 controlled assessments. You've got to make sure that yours stand out. If you are a hairdresser or a beautician, if you had someone to come and observe you and all you did was straighten hair or put on mascara, you are not going to get good marks as a stylist or a beautician. However, if you show the examiner or the observer all the tricks you can do, all the techniques you can do, you're going to get top marks. And that's just the same as being an English student. If all you do is saying a man is bored, a man is frustrated, you are not going to get a C grade or even maybe not a D grade. However, if you use all the tricks that you've got, all the tools that you know, if you use hyperbole, if you use alliteration, if you use metaphors, if you use sensory language, if you use adjectives at the start of the sentence, you are going to get a much better grade than if you don't. So like I said before, an example of a rubbish sentence is David was angry. That is an E to D response. And it's also a telling sentence. So a show me sentence for David is angry is David stomped to his desk, spilling coffee as he went. Pushing past a group of people, he threw himself into his chair. With one sweep of his hand, he cleared his desk and growled at the nearest secretary. So a good way or an easy way in your description of showing and not telling is by describing in close detail a body part. So for example, the fact that David sweeps with his hand, so he whacks all the stuff off his desk, gives the reader a clear image. It doesn't just say he's angry, we don't know where he is, we don't know what he's doing, we don't know how he's showing his anger. We know straight away that he's probably in an office, in his own office, and with one sweep of his hand he's aggressively showing to the reader how angry he is. So then I got the people in the class to have a look at this unusual cat, and I gave you another sentence was, it was an unusual cat. A boring sentence, how was the cat unusual? It's not giving the reader any sort of image in the mind. However, if you said, with yellow eyes glowing red, long black fur that stood an end, a mouthful of sharp pointed teeth that emitted a yowl like a tiger, I knew that the small animal before me was no ordinary cat. So if we compare to the blue to the red, the showing sentence to the telling sentence, we've got descriptions with adjectives, with colours, we've got a simile emitted like a yowl like a tiger. So immediately it makes it more interesting for the reader and more memorable and more descriptive at the same time. So I just wanted to show you a C grade response. So generally this is an okay response and meets the criteria of being a low C grade. But even in this description, which got a C, we get a boring, telling description of her mother got annoyed. So it's not very descriptive, and that makes it not very effective. However, we do start off up here with a moody teenager. You might think this would be a telling sentence. However, it carries on by saying a moody teenager trailed several meters behind her argumentative mother and father. So the title for this was a scene in a busy supermarket. So the fact that it's a moody teenager could be boring. However, afterwards, by saying trailed several meters behind, it does give the reader an image of a mum and dad walking around the shop with the moody or aggressive teenager a bit behind, almost thinking to him or herself, why on earth am I here? I hate going around with my mum and dad. So it does give a vivid description to the reader. Another example I gave was fear. So what I asked my students to do was, in 2 sentences, use this image or use another image, the one they would want to create, and write 2 sentences showing or describing a person who is scared about to open a door where something bad may happen, and try to use, like we just looked at, to try to focus on a feature of his or her body to exaggerate the feeling. So for example, with this image here of the baby, we could maybe talk about how the baby's showing how scared it is with its wide eyes and wide mouth. So maybe we could do a simile, the eyes were as wide as whatever. Okay, but you didn't have to use this image, you could use any other image. And we then shared with our partners. So my example for fear was, he narrowed his bloodshot eyes, feeling the twitch return to his left eyelid. Drips of moisture formed along his hairline as a surge of electrifying adrenaline coursed through his veins. His clammy hands clenched tightly. So in that, I've got 3 or 4 things to tell me that the person is feeling fear. So bloodshot red eyes might mean the person that can't sleep. A twitch is another thing that shows nerves or being afraid. Drips of moisture show sweat. Clammy hands also means someone who's nervous. So there, I've managed to do a 3-sentence or 2 or 3 sentence description without using the word scared, without using the word fear, without using the word frightening or afraid. So I've not used any of the telling words that tell me something's afraid. I've used lots of descriptive words to give a vivid image to the reader. Top box here, if you want to do it yourself and pause the video. The top box was, we got some nice descriptive showing sentences, but obviously I'd like you to do a lot better than this when you got to your controlled assessments. And all I was then going to say is, in that box, what does it show the reader? So if we do one example, last year's calendar hung on the wall, then I asked my students, well, what does that show the reader? It might show us a few things, and one thing it may be that the person who lives there is lazy and doesn't clean the house. It may mean that last year, maybe there was a special reason why on a special date they want to be remembered about that part on the calendar. Or another student mentioned maybe that it's like a personalised calendar. Maybe there's a particular photo that person wants to forget and never wants to take down. Okay, then the second box is you get the boring sentences, and then I wanted you to do showing sentences. So for example, it had been raining heavily, and my showing sentence was deep puddles covered the path. So without saying it had been raining heavily, I get a vivid description, a really interesting description to show me the sentence. So another example you could be, it was a very dark night. One of my students came up with a pitch black blanket covered the sky. Another student, he was shy. We started thinking about, well, maybe someone who's shy at a party. What things could we say about them? The lonesome boy moved away from the crowd and away from the fun. That's not a particularly great description, but it's a lot more descriptive than he was shy. So then I wanted one of my students to look at these emotions. Surprised, sad. It was then you choose one of the emotions we've identified and write another sentence using the body to describe that particular emotion. So one student came up with this for being bored. Impatiently, the mustachioed man tapped his fingers onto the desk. So it's written in the third person and it's written in the past tense, both of which you need to do for your controlled assessment. We've also got an adverb. So remember that an adverb is an adjective that describes the verb. So it's not just that he tapped, he impatiently told us. So we can tell this person is bored, this person is waiting for something. Also, it gives the image of someone tapping their desk, something that you've probably done in school when you're a bit fed up. You tap the desk almost to give yourself something else to do. The second part of the session, I got students to read through student work past controlled assessments. Here is our mark scheme, As you know, on your controlled assessment you get marked out of 20. 14 marks is this side, and this is content and organisation. So this is things like how descriptive your piece is, how detailed your piece is, do your paragraph link, how ambitious your vocab is. Is it in order? Is it good sequencing? And is it appropriate? Well, 6 marks is spelling, punctuation and grammar. Then I got my students to read the work. There was 3 pieces of work I gave. Then I wanted to give them 1 mark for content and 1 mark for spelling, punctuation and grammar. So for example, if you thought that the content was 8 and the spelling punctuation was 4, that would give 12 out of 20. And down here in the pink box I gave rough grades. However, please be aware these do move, so these aren't gospel. So if we quickly go through the work, I don't want to go through this too much in detail because I have done a separate podcast on an A answer for the Seen at a Fun Fair question. And all of these 3 are from Seen at a Fun Fair. So I'll quickly read, or at least read part of it through. Walking towards the fairground was a thrill in itself, one that built with every step. The night was cool but dry, perfect for a great night out. The fair wouldn't be visible until we turned the final corner, but already our expectations and the sheer suspense of it all were building to a peak. Sounds were already beginning to pour through the air. Boom, 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 and laser lights were lighting up the clouds, making them seem somehow unearthly and weird. We were going to have the time of our lives. London, and wow, was it big. It shone like a circle of diamonds in the sky. Spangled bright and vivid. Surely the London Eye can't be bigger than this, right? How can they transport such huge things on the back of a lorry? The next thing that us was a glorious warm smell unique to fun fairs, a mingling of frying hot dogs, cheeseburgers, fried onion, candy floss, toffee apples and diesel fumes. This was a delight for the senses. So I got the students to read this through, and obviously the main problem is there are a few problems, but this wasn't a chunk of the controlled assessment. This was a whole of the controlled assessment. So this was an hour work. Remember, you get an hour for your controlled assessment. So obviously we haven't got commas, we haven't got correct spelling, so senses, cheese, toffee, quite a few spelling mistakes. However, the first paragraph is quite high in quality. It's not a bad paragraph. So I got the students to mark this piece of work. So pause if you want to read and try to use the mark scheme. So this work got 8 out of 20. It got 5 for content and 3 for spelling, punctuation and grammar. The main problem was the brevity, so this means how long the piece was. There wasn't enough quantity. So have a read through of that particular document if you want to look at it in further detail. Okay, I'm not going to read this through. So if you want to have a read of yourself and try to mark it yourself, so pause now. Okay, so this one was a little bit better. This would have been around the C grade. It got 9 for content, 5 for spelling, punctuation and grammar. It says a number of the details were good, but could have been developed. The spelling, punctuation and grammars were basically good. However, there were a few occasional problems. So because of that, it didn't get top marks. The last thing we looked at, or the last document we looked at, feel free to read through. This is the one I'm doing a separate podcast on. So please, if you want to have further detail on this answer, because this is the A answer, this is 19 out of 20 or A star, please look at the podcast. It will be BPC English on the creative writing page, but you can also find it if you just go onto our YouTube page, BPC English, it will be on there. So feel free to pause if you want to mark it yourself. Okay, so this one got, like I said, got 19. It got 13 out of 14 for content. There was a few lapses. Sometimes there was probably the wrong choice of words. But generally it was a very good piece. Maybe it could have been a bit more mature at some points. Some of the similes they use is a little bit immature. For example, he held the can of lager like a newborn baby. Doesn't particularly go that well. Spelling, punctuation and grammar, it got 6 out of 6, so pretty much perfect for spelling, punctuation and grammar. But like I say, please go to the podcast. It will help you in your controlled assessment based on this question. Okay, so that's the end of the podcast on show, don't tell. So hopefully you've got the idea that you will get a good grade. You've got to give me a show sentence. So tell me how the man is bored, and obviously using physical characteristics and features is going to help you there. So hopefully it's good use to you and will end your controlled assessment. Thanks very much.